Her heart stopped under a sheet of river ice, and that's the only reason she survived. In the coldest room in the hospital, we had to warm her back 1 careful degree at a time. My name is Eirik Halvorsen, consultant in anesthesia and intensive care at the University Hospital of Northern Norway in Tromsø, a building that braces its shoulders against the Barents wind and pretends weather is a rumor. If you stand by the service entrance on a night when the air has teeth, you can hear the place breathe, ventilators sighing like sleeping animals, dialysis pumps worrying over their small rivers, elevator cables thrumming low as if plucked by a patient god. The corridors smell of disinfectant, wet wool, and coffee boiled until it tastes faintly of iron. I have worked here long enough that the floors know my shoes and the night staff trust my silences. Long enough to keep 2 maxims in my pocket: life is stubborn, winter keeps a ledger. People imagine intensive care as alarms and shouting, but most nights it is only brightness arranged against the dark. The true sound is the ballistic of fluorescent tubes counting their own lives, and the minor hiss of air agreeing to pass in and out of lungs that would rather rest. We try not to make promises we cannot keep. We'll see how you do by morning is a way of telling a family we will not hurry the sun. In winter, the sun is a rumor too. The call came near dusk, which is to say it was almost light and almost dark, the length of the day when the sky forgets its duties. The helicopter medic's voice cracked through the radio as if the wind itself were holding the transmitter. A skier through the ice east of Narvik. Trapped under the river for a long time. How long? The medic would not guess. Only a long time. Pulled out. No palpable pulse. Pupils maybe, but cold muddles pupils. Airway secured. They were lifting now. He added her name because he recognized her when they cut her from the ice. Anna, one of ours, from radiology. The room changed shape without moving. We did the small choreography that pretends to be calm. Kjell, our perfusionist, lives close enough to jog and always arrives as if he has. He began priming the heart, lung machine, watching the reservoirs whirl with the detached, parental pride of a man who knows his machine is ugly and will save you anyway. Sigrid, our cardiac surgeon, was on her way, boots half zipped when she answered the call. Liv, the registrar, on with me, careful voice and careful hands, laid out esophageal probes, warmed fluids, and covered the crash cart with a drape like a modesty blanket. Someone up the corridor repeated the sentence we keep like a talisman on a laminated card taped to the blood warmer. No one is dead until warm and dead. It sounds like superstition until you have had reason to say it loudly in a cold room at 3 in the morning. I have said it loudly. I have whispered it as apology. When the rotors bullied the roof into attention, the operating theater was already hot and overlit, the way you overheat a nursery because you are terrified of drafts. We wheeled in the bypass machine and spread blankets over the steel as if metal needed comfort. Liv began, softly, to rehearse the steps of femoral cannulation, not because she would do it, but because speaking in order keeps a room's blood pressure where you want it. They pushed her in with helicopter orange wrapped around her like a warning flag. Frost salted her lashes. Her hair was stiff with river crystals that had no business being beautiful. Skin the color of porcelain that has learned indifference. I have closed a dead man's eyes warmer than her shoulder. Name? I asked the medic, though we already knew. Anna, he said. Radiology. Went through a thin place. The current pinned her under the pain. Found an air pocket at first. We cut. We pulled. He looked at the floor. Then, nothing. We lifted anyway. Esophageal probe. The number appeared like a dry voice. 13.7 degrees Celsius. The room made the sound rooms make when people choose their next behavior. Pupils small, not blown. Jaw stiff but willing. The monitor, when we stuck electrodes to a chest determined not to help, produced a line across a flat country. We pressed fingers to arteries that declined to declare themselves. Cold flattens everything. Cold is the last honest dictator. "Not dead," I said aloud, because a room sometimes needs a stubborn man. We rewarm. The long way. Sigrid was already gloving. Kjell glanced up and nodded like a man recognizing an old road even in a storm. Femoral artery and vein live where thumbs remember. Sigrid opened the groin with a neat, stern cut. Iodine rose like shipyard air. The cannulas went in white rubber against white skin, inelegant as plumbing and twice as faithful. Kjell brought the pump up to a whisper, then a murmur, then a conversation. Pull, push, warm by a single degree. Pull, push. On the door frame clock, seconds clicked like smug metronomes. Time is rude in rooms like this. ABG, Liv said, arterial blood gas. The result read like a poem textbooks never print, acidity drifting down but not decadent, the chemical that reports on starved muscles lower than panic would like, because cold slows even suffering. Oxygen a polite lie thanks to a ventilator willing to pretend her lungs were in the mood. We wrapped hands and feet in clear plastic because there is always one thing you can do that isn't medicine but is mercy. We threaded an esophageal thermometer to where stories are true. 15 degrees. 17. At 18, we offered a shock for form's sake, a single obedient thump across a chest that had every excuse not to notice. The monitor sketched a startled fish and went back to its line. At 20, the muscle twitched like an animal dreaming. At 22, there was the smallest of murmurs where there had been a blink. "Wait," I said, to the room, to the machine, to myself. The most difficult trick in our trade is to earn the right to do nothing. The medic told us the rest in quiet parts as we waited. Anna had been with 2 friends, both physicians, blessing or curse depending on the day. A turn on hard snow, a seam where the river ran black under its gloss, a pain treacherous as lacquer. The ski caught the far bank, the river took her. Pinned between rocks and ice, she found a pocket of air and an agreement with physics that lasted longer than is reasonable. Her friends radioed, shouted, shipped ice with skis and poles until the rescue team came with saws the cold took personally. By the time they pulled her up, she had stopped arguing. 80 minutes? More? The numbers are romantic and slippery. The body's stopwatch is not polite enough to be exact when the world goes white. At 25, the line developed a stutter that lifted Liv's shoulders. At 27, she whispered a name too happy for the moment and then closed her eyes as if she could apologize to fate. At 28, the heart did the thing I have seen only a handful of times. One beat like a thought, then 2, then a small agreement with itself. Slow as a winter dawn. Idiotic in its irregularity and therefore beautiful. We did not cheer. Pride kills. Kjell eased the warming a fraction. Sigrid rested the back of her gloved hand on the drape near the collarbone as if it were possible to steady a rhythm by proximity. The ventilator ticked its small hymn. The monitor made an honest graph. When we were certain the heart was not merely briefly cheerful, we prepared to shift the work upstairs. The machine decelerated like a kind horse. The groin was packed and dressed with the respect you give a place that let you pass. We covered her with warm air that thrummed like a friendly hairdryer and wheeled the bed into the corridor that pretends not to be a parade route. In ICU, we keep a light a few shades kinder than the operating rooms and a music of beeps nurses can hear through walls. Ola, who has the improbable grace of a dancer despite calves scarred by winter sports, adjusted her lines with an authority that makes machines obey. Inga from respiratory set the ventilator to breathe like a patient friend, not greedy, not lazy, willing to wait. The whiteboard by bed 3 began as nouns, sedation, warmth, flow, and lengthened into verbs, watch, wait, wean. Warming is not a button. It is manners. We warmed her the way you earn a nervous dog's trust, slow, consistent, no surprises. The liver sulked and then remembered its job. The kidneys hid behind a curtain for a day, then sent a message that they were considering cooperation. Everyone wanted to talk about brain. I refused poetry. The brain came back like a building's lights switching on floor by floor. We sedated and let sleep take the first watch. We spoke to her because a room with voices is the kind you can return to without apology. Sometime on the third day, her eyelids offered an argument. She opened them just enough to make the air reconsider itself. We explained the tube and the lines and the busy beeps. She frowned, softened, frowned again, not at us, at the tax of staying. Her hand found a marker. She wrote cold with the blocky letters of a person writing with mittens. Yes, I said, and because small talk with returning people is beyond me, I added, you did not miss much while you were gone. Radiology arrived as if we were a museum displaying a valuable object for the last time. They stood at the glass and pretended their eyes were dry. Magnus, the colleague who always brings cake when cake is not appropriate, put his palm to the glass and left it clear, what print that one of the nurses wordlessly wiped away, because nurses keep rooms from turning into places where ghosts leave fingerprints. On day 7 by the whiteboard, she spoke, a dry whisper. How long? A safe question. Long enough to impress a city, I said. Her eyebrows allowed a millimeter of sarcasm. She accepted water like a contract. People do not want the boring parts of survival, but the boring parts are the point. Weak legs. Fingers that forget their paragraphs. The ache a head discovers when it realizes it was briefly free of bodies. She moved from our breath to her own in small, ungainly lurches. The physios arrived with unreasonable cheer, parallel bars, and calendars. Today is standing. Tomorrow is a step. She swore softly, which comforted me more than any prayer. One afternoon, she cried in the lift when a stranger's scarf carried the river's smell. The lift respected the scene and sang no song about floors. Her mountain friends came to stand at the window and practice, living with the sight of her living. They had done everything right, cut ice, pushed air, believed beyond reason. It is rude to tell heroes that the water may have done some protecting, that cold can be a shield if you speak to it slowly. We told them anyway, gently, because you cannot let them keep a story that will haunt them. They needed to know they were one part of a ledger that also included rocks, current, a helicopter pilot with hard hands, and a Norway that had decided to be slightly kind. When radiology smuggled her a coffee, she sipped and made a face. Everything tastes like a waiting room, she said. That was when I permitted myself the private superstition of believing she would go home. Before Anna, there were other winters. Every clinician accumulates scenes that do not ask permission to return. Mine go back farther than my contract. My father ran coastal rescue out of Hammerfest when I was a boy. I learned weather as other sons learn knots. He would stand in the kitchen and look at the window as if the air rode on it and say, "We stay in today," and I would sulk as if the weather had singled me out for insult. He taught me the ledger the ocean keeps. When a fisherman fell and the sea gave him back warm enough for grief, my father would come home smelling of rope and diesel and fried coffee and say nothing. When the sea kept him, my father would talk about the price of rope. Years later in Tromsø, 2 winters before Anna, we had a cold one. A fisherman found ours too late, pulled ashore into pity more than hope. We warmed him gently and long, and nothing in him accepted the invitation. The same perfusionist primed the same machine, the same surgeon draped the same groin, the same watch face clicked like an insult. We wrote warm and dead on the line where you write what you dare not say to a wife. When people recite "no one is dead until warm and dead to me," I nod and offer the rest of the sentence I keep in my pocket and never put on a poster, and sometimes warm arrives to find no one left to be warm. It does not comfort. It keeps my hands honest. I tell you this because I refuse miracle. If there is terror in the ICU, it isn't blood or bone or siren. It is the unembarrassed quiet of a body that has stepped off the moving walkway, how the room obeys its stillness, how the lights pretend not to flicker in the rhythm of a kitchen clock 30 kilometers away. It is the way a machine makes the same sound whether it saves you or serenades an empty house. On the 10th day, Anna asked for a pen that didn't feel like a toy. She wrote a list: parents, boots, hairbrush, no television. She added 2 boxes and ticked them herself: sleep, breathe. I told Liv to put the list on the whiteboard. It looked like therapy and a grocery run. Later, when I came back from the quieter room where we lie to relatives about certainty, Anna pointed at the boxes and said, "Small victories," and then, after a pause that tested her breath, "whose hands were on me." I named them, not in order of importance, but in order of appearance: Sigrid at the groin, Kjell at the pump, Ola and Inga and Liv, the medic with the saw, the pilot with the muscle, the friends on the ice, the people she could not see, like the woman who warmed the saline before any of us knew we'd need it. "Everything tastes like a waiting room," she repeated, and then smiled despite the scold. But I cake. She paid that debt within a week of leaving the unit. Anesthetists eat cake as a moral hazard, because if we did not, we would find another vice that would cost more. The day she balanced a box of pastries on a plastic tray in the radiology break room, word slipped up the stairs, and the perfusionist drifted over with the shy entitlement of a man who wants to see whether the messy thing he helped make looks tidy in daylight. He stood in the doorway and watched her tell a joke badly. His smile was small and private and left his jaw out of the conversation. "Do you remember anything?" I asked later, in the corridor where consultant talk becomes gossip without the mercy of laughter. "Water sounded like a wall," she said. "Then it sounded like breath." She shrugged. "Then nothing. And then everything sounded like a room shushing itself." "The ventilator," I said. "I thought so," she said. "It shushed like a fussy ant." She went to a ward window that opened onto a slice of sea where barges sit like obedient animals and said, "The cold was so complete it felt like a rule." "Our job," I said, trying to be wise for a second and hating myself for it, was to write a footnote. She laughed in the way that blesses a room before you can scold yourself for thinking in such words. Hospital time is tight time. Months swell and thin without warning. One morning you notice that the geranium on the ICU sill has forgiven everyone. One afternoon you realize a nurse is wearing new shoes and has not spoken about her knees in 3 shifts. One evening the emergency department phones to say they are sending you a man who swallowed a deck of cards for a bet and then lost the joke. The river keeps its counsel. After Anna, the nurses began saying a new sentence when they turned up the blood warmer. We did a thing once, as if superstition could be a team sport. The registrar class after Livs brought their carefulness to a lecture I gave about cold. I wrote slow on the whiteboard, so large it looked dumb. We discussed cannulas as wooden spoons, waiting as an intervention, how pride is the most expensive drug in any unit. Someone asked whether we should stock a fancier machine, a machine that would please a camera. "No," I said. "We should stock patients." The head nurse clapped once without making a sound. Our administration followed with its own ritual, an incident review with crisp coffee and tidy questions. They wanted a timeline and less of a story. What could we have done differently? A quality officer asked, pencil poised to write down a verb. We could have panicked in 3 languages, I said. We could have shocked earlier and damaged muscle that was learning how to be a person again. Liv kicked my shoe. We could have done nothing, she cut in. We chose the long way. We stuck to it. The official wrote adhered to protocol on a line that did not deserve it, and I let it stand because policy likes to believe it wrote courage. Press found us, as press does when a city decides to be proud. The hospital released a statement that said nothing you could argue with and used no adjectives we would have to defend at the next case like it. A producer called to ask whether we would allow filming of the machine that warmed her. "It's not pretty," I said. "Neither is breakfast sometimes," he said brightly. I did not call him back. Anna returned to radiology by autumn. The first case she read on call was a gallbladder, clean stones, neat lines. She moved the slice forward and back with a wrist that had learned to obey. When a junior apologized for waking her at 2 o'clock to ask if that line was a duct or a scar, she said, "Wake me for duct or scar anytime and mend it." People repay debts in currencies they can afford. She sent a note to the helicopter crew with a cake, because we are a country that solves moral debts with baked goods. She sent a postcard to the rescue team. "If you ever need a film read at midnight, call me," and meant that too. One afternoon, she came up to ICU with a cheap frame and a photograph, a summer stream behaving like a brochure. On the back, she had written "same place, different season," and not signed it because signature was redundant. She placed it on the windowsill next to Ola's grumpy geranium. We let it gather dust because dust is the tax you pay for keeping anything. You want horror? Fine. One night in November, the fluorescent ballast above bed 3 ticked the exact rhythm of a kitchen clock I owned when I was poor and medical student then. Tick, tick, tick. Lights count even when people stop. I stood with my hand on the rail of a man who would not exit the ledger in a way that let his wife keep her kindness intact, and the light counted us all. Bed 3 had bananas. I don't believe in hunting that comes when you call and leaves when you are brave, but I know how rooms remember. I know how my ear has learned to make patterns I swore I had given up. Or this. Months later, a winter tourist ignored a sign and went through a thin place 3 fjords south. He came out red and loud and scolding the air. We wrapped him, scolded back, and let him go. I drove home tired and found a postcard on my desk. A stream in summer. No handwriting. No stamp. Just the picture. I tucked it under the water because superstition is cheaper than sleep. There is an ethic in our unit I try not to craft into a religion. We are punctuation, not author. You stand between clauses and offer commas. You resist the period. That night with the ballast ticking like a kitchen clock, I imagined my job written in chalk on the wall. Do not hurry. I underlined it twice. I heard my father in the kitchen in Hammerfest reading the window and saying we stay in today. Then I finished the chart and washed my hands in water that felt like weather and returned to the bedside and told the nurse I would sit. When Anna returned that winter, scarf at her throat, we let her in the unit because superstition had drifted toward hospitality. She watched the monitors like an ex-smoker watches a stranger's cigarette, longing wrapped in disgust. "I thought I would feel brave," she said, "and I only feel tall, like I can see more of the room." "Tall is honest," I said. She turned to the window, listened to the building breathe, and said, "I remember thinking the water had personality." "Is that a thing?" "Everything has personality if you listen too long," I said. "Even the ventilator." "Shush," she told the ventilator. It behaved. Her parents came on a Thursday afternoon when the city smelled of thaw and exhaust. They had the fragile politeness of travelers who think any noise might make the world tilt back to the day of the accident. Her mother put oatcakes on a napkin for us, as if we were children left with the television. Her father shook every hand with a farmer's earnestness and then changed to 2 hands because he wanted to make sure the shake happened. They thanked us in enough ways that I imagined drowning in gratitude and felt unkind. Later, Liv said, they needed to place weight somewhere. Let them, and I realized kindness does not require flattering our discomfort. Her friends from the river came too. One brought a strip of the sawed ice in a sealed bag, as if archaeology could fix time. It sweated in the hospital air and left a wet place on the counter like a dark sentence. "Throw it away," Anna said gently. He did not look relieved. He looked what people look like when they are asked to part with pain. He put the bag in the bin and stood with his empty hands like a boy waiting for a verdict. "Come skiing," she said. "Slow." He nodded as if he had been given probation. "There is a phase, F-is-E. I write it like that because I used to spell it wrong in my head when everything becomes a test of whether you will carry the experience like a badge or like a tool. Anna carried it like a tool. When a patient arrived for CT and saw her name and said, "Oh, you're the one," she nodded and asked him if he kept metal in his body. When he tried to talk about weather, she asked whether he had eaten. When he said he had not, she said, "We will make the pictures first, and then you will find soup." Stories are fine. Soup is kinder. The months after taught me other kinds of patience. A new registrar told me he wanted to be there when something amazing happened. I handed him a stool and pointed at a breathless woman with pneumonia. "Sit with her all night," I said. "If she makes it to morning because you kept her from being lonely, that is amazing." He frowned because he could not put that on a lanyard. He sat anyway. The next week, he sat twice in a chart and looked surprised that he had written a verb he had not been taught. Radiology added a small dent in their countertop when someone dropped a film canister. I liked the dent. It said the room had hosted a miracle and chose furniture instead of shrine. Miracles are demanding neighbors. They expect to be fed stories. Furniture asks only for dusting. In January, the river hid again under a pane. I drove up with a friend to the pull-off where the plow admitted defeat and we finished the distance on foot. Fox Tracks wrote tiny calligraphy in the crust. The stream lay under a clean sheet. My friend said, "You are not superstitious," in the tone people use when they want permission. I talked to weather, I said. Which is worse? I held my hand out and felt the air above the ice walk into it. "Thank you for being both teeth and mercy," I said out loud, because I am too old to pretend. It changed nothing in the world, which is to say it changed me enough to drive home without a story demanding to be repeated. I returned to the unit to find a family searching for a chair that did not squeak. I found them one. The daughter was 12, at that age when anger keeps sadness warm. She held her phone like a weapon she was forbidden to use. She looked at me and said, "Is my mother going to die?" with the grammar children reserved for adults who have been caught lying before. "Not tonight," I said, "because we don't promise futures, only ours." Later, the mother woke enough to ask whether her daughter had eaten. I wanted to tell someone that this was the miracle. I wrote 8 in the chart instead. Anna sent occasional messages that read like postcards addressed to a city. Took the lift today without crying. Read a study and did not think of rivers once. Snow fell in the picture window at work, and I felt nothing except happy to have a window. Sometimes a line would arrive with no return address. You were right about habit. I tucked them under my blotter like pressed leaves. If administration had asked about them, I would have called them training material and watched their faces adopt the mask they wear when they suspect you of poetry. On a week in March when the sky behaved like glass, we had 3 admissions before midnight and 2 after, none of them Anna's, all of them somebody's. Liv's carefulness hardened into stamina. Kjell noticed early and primed the machine even though we did not need it because readiness makes rooms braver. Sigrid arrived for a case that unspooled without drama, which is the kind of case that makes surgeons swear they are superstitious and then swear again because now they have said the word. At a lull deep enough to hear the building think, I walked to the windowsill where the summer stream kept summering next to Ola's stubborn geranium. Dust made a halo on the frame. I did not wipe it. We keep certain halos on purpose. I thought of the maxim taped to the blood warmer and the half sentence I will not print. I thought of my father reading weather on a window. I thought of a woman under ice choosing an air pocket and physics choosing to let her. Months later, in a lecture theater that smelled of coats, I told the new class about cold. I did not say miracle. I wrote weight on the board in letters large enough to embarrass a room. I told them that warming is a verb with rules and that patience is a tool, not a virtue. I told them that the worst sound in an operating theater is a clock's confidence. I told them that it is reasonable to talk to a patient who is not speaking, not because they can hear you, perhaps they can, perhaps they cannot, but because your hands listen when your mouth stays kind. A student asked whether I believed the phrase about being dead and warm. Yes, I said. I believe the whole sentence. Which whole sentence? He said. All of it, I said, and left it there because not everything deserves a footnote out loud. Did she thank you? Someone asked. I told them about cake. That seemed to satisfy even the ones who would have preferred a golden light and an anthem. A year and a winter passed. The geranium forgave us, then scolded us, then forgave again. The photograph yellowed only at the edges, as if even decay had agreed to be courteous. Bed 3 held 3 men and 2 women and a child with lungs that decided by dawn to behave so well that the unit applauded in its quiet way. One nurse laughed without making a noise, and a consultant wrote excellent in a chart, as if that were rebellious. Anna skied again, helmeted, companioned by rope and care. She came to the unit with a list of cases we owed radiology and a cake that tried to be modest and failed. She watched the ventilator shush and said, "Auntie," in an affectionate insult. She put her hand on the rail of bed 4 and did not flinch. She asked Ola about the geranium's mood, and he complained with performative vigor. She left, and the unit did not pose for the snapshot that wasn't taken. Later, in the kitchenette where coffee becomes confession, Liv said, "You are gentler with the ventilator since Anna," and I said, "We are gentler with nearly everything." She nodded. "Except quality," she said. "We are mean to quality." We laughed the laugh of people who know which word is which. On certain shifts, late, when the census is cruel and the phones are bored and the snow outside squeaks the way it only does below a certain truth, I touch the laminated card by the blood warmer. The plastic has a nick at one corner and the ink has faded around the vowel in warm. I do not need to read it. I can recite it in the lift. But I touch it anyway. A superstition as small and useful as the ones my grandmother taught me: spit on your palms before you lift, never turn a loaf upside down, thank the weather even as you curse it. No one is dead until warm and dead. The harsh grace of that kept a room honest long enough for a heart to remember. The second sentence I keep in my pocket, the one I never laminate because it belongs only to me: we are punctuation, not author. Resist the period. Offer commas until the grammar changes. Anna signs her reports with the steady flourish of someone who has negotiated successfully with silence. When I pass radiology in winter, I sometimes see her through the glass, head tilted at a screen, frown like a question that deserves an answer. Sometimes she looks up and catches me catching her and does a small wave with fingers that once made letters blocky and cold. I wave back, and the moment chooses not to mean anything grand. That is a mercy. Not every scene deserves a moral. Some deserve only to end. I still drive upriver on certain days when the air is a sheet and the road a suggestion. I park where the plow gives up and finish on foot, following the tiny calligraphy of Fox. I do not step on the ice. Norway taught me which rules are actual. I stand at the edge and let the cold walk into my palm and up my wrist and say the one true sentence that is only mine: "Thank you for being both teeth and mercy." Then I go back to the hospital with its bright rooms and its honest machines and its overconfident clocks, and I wash my hands in water that feels like weather. And I say to the registrar what I say at the beginning of every case where waiting is the plan disguised as caution: say what you will do. Do it. Do not hurry. When I step into theater 2 and it smells of iodine and warmed plastic, I can still feel the moment that the line on the monitor learned to draw a loop and then another, and then another. I can still feel the way the room did not cheer. I can still see the surgeon's gloved hand resting on the drape near a collarbone as if she could lend steadiness by presence. I can still hear the perfusionist's machine gargling its ugly, faithful song. I can still hear the ventilator shushing like a fussy ant. I can still see Liv's shoulders lift the way they do when a rhythm promises to be interesting. The ledger of winter is not closed. It never closes. It lets you write a line you do not deserve sometimes, and charges you twice for the ones you do. But our work is not the balancing. Our work is the comma. Our work is the slow. Our work is the mercy of machines used without pride. Our work is the stubbornness to say not dead in a room sized for endings. Our work is to hold a hand that is porcelain and pretend the hand can hear your voice until, just possibly, it can. When the night is quiet enough to hear the building breathe, I walk the corridor and stop at bed 3 and bed 4 and whichever other bed has introduced itself to me that hour. I look at the summer stream in its cheap frame. The dust halo remains around it like a crown for something that refuses sainthood. I touch the radiator as I leave habit and the warmth agrees. Outside, the air bites kindly. Somewhere a river behaves, somewhere else it is rehearsing its winter rules. I go home carefully because winter keeps a ledger, and I have already taken a line from it.